How were women punished in medieval prisons? In medieval times, prison was a fate worse than death. It was considered the worst punishment one could receive. Life in medieval prisons was very hard for both men and women. However, the women faced more abuse than the men. In this video, we are going to show you what kind of abuses these women had to suffer in the hands of their jailers. Welcome back to our channel where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Dirt or dead animals. The opening of the sack was then tied off and the condemned was thrown into a river or left on the roadside to die. This horrific punishment was called the death penalty by sacking or being sacked. This was a legal term that meant that the woman lost all of her property and rights upon conviction. The woman was hung by a rope around her neck, but unlike regular hangings, the executioner did not break her neck. Instead, he let her live while dangling from the gallows. The woman was forced to drink a potion made from the ashes of her husband's body. The potion was said to be so powerful that it killed the woman instantly, including petty crimes such as stealing food, as well as serious offenses such as murder. Women were subjected to a variety of punishments, including being sewn up in a sack, being locked in a tower, or being burned at the stake. Life in medieval prison was dangerous and brutal, and women were often left to die from disease or starvation. This form of capital punishment was used throughout Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. This punishment was designed to humiliate and degrade the woman. The woman was left to dangle until she eventually died. This form of capital punishment was used throughout Europe in the 18th century. The woman was also usually banished from the kingdom, and she was forbidden to ever return. The woman was usually burned at the stake for crimes such as heresy or witchcraft. Burning was a very slow and painful way to die, and it was intended to be a warning to other women who might be tempted to break the law. One of the most famous cases of a woman being burnt at the stake was that of Joan of Arc. Joan was a French peasant girl who heard voices telling her to drive the English out of France. She led the French army to victory in several battles, but she was eventually captured by the English and burnt at the stake for heresy. The story of Macbeth is the most famous example of the wife's forfeit. After Lady Macbeth murders King Duncan, she loses her mind and eventually takes her own life. Sanitation was poor, and food and water were often contaminated. This led to the spread of disease, and many prisoners died from infection. Prisoners were also frequently subjected to horrific experiments by medical practitioners. These experiments often involved torture and mutilation, and they were conducted without the consent of the prisoners. Many prisoners died as a result of these experiments. The condemned would usually be left to die slowly and painfully from suffocation. The perpetrators behind this gruesome punishment believed that it was a necessary evil. They said that it was needed to stop the spread of disease and corruption. Many people who were sewn up in sacks did not die right away, and they managed to make it to the river surface alive. These people were sometimes rescued, but in many cases they were left to drown. If a pregnant woman was sentenced to be sewn up in a sack, the baby would be ripped out of her womb during the process. The baby's heart was then cut out and eaten by the executioner. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This was a three-legged stool that was positioned over a pond or a river. The accused witch was stripped naked and tied to the stool. She would then be dropped into the water repeatedly until she drowned. This cruel and unusual punishment was used as a way to extract confessions from witches. The idea was that the water would wash away the devil's influence and the witch would confess her crimes. In some cases, the accused witch was forced to sit on the ducking stool for hours without being dropped into the water. This was done to humiliate and torture the accused. Women's prisons were often attached to monasteries or convents. In some cases, the women were imprisoned for simply making love. If a woman was found to be promiscuous, her punishment might be more severe. She might be paraded through the streets of her town or village, while people threw rocks and other objects at her. The punishment for adultery was severe in many countries in Europe. The adulterer, both the man and the woman, could be put to death. The man was usually put to death in the public square, while the woman was locked up in the tower. The woman could stay in the tower until she gave birth. After giving birth, she was either put to death or left alone in the tower to raise the child alone. Many times the infants born in the tower died from neglect. The nuns in the convent would look after the prisoners, and many times they were given the same punishments that the prisoners were given. The pillory was a wooden frame which was designed to hold the criminal securely in place. The head and the neck were placed in a hole at the top of the structure, and then the arms were put through holes on either side of the headrest. Once locked into position, the condemned could neither move nor escape. In some variations of the pillory, the victim's legs were also secured together below the headrest. The pillory was used to punish women for petty crimes like stealing, as well as serious offenses such as murder. Public humiliation was an important part of the punishment, and oftentimes the pillory was placed in busy market squares. People passing by could throw rotten vegetables and other items at the trapped woman. Sometimes people even urinated on the woman while she sat in the pillory. As you can imagine, death by pillory was a slow process, and it took hours before the condemned finally succumbed to their injuries. A person could die from exhaustion, starvation, or dehydration. Sometimes the pillory was referred to as the stocks, especially when the lower half of the body was also secured. This happened because they were seen as instruments of God and they were not allowed to show any emotions such as pity or mercy. The nuns believed that showing mercy was a sin. Women convicted of crimes like stealing food or other items were sentenced to prolonged fasts. The nuns made sure that these women learned their lesson by punishing them with hunger and thirst. In some cases, the women were locked up for so long that they died. The pillory was another form of capital punishment used on women during the Middle Ages. One of the most painful punishments that a woman could face in the Middle Ages was being sewn up in a sack, along with other objects such as rocks. Women accused of practicing witchcraft were often subjected to the ducking stool. Women who were found guilty of having sex outside of marriage were often sentenced to be locked up in a tower or wall. The punishment for a woman found guilty of murdering her husband was known as the wife's forfeit. Women who were convicted of murdering their husbands were also subjected to a gruesome form of capital punishment known as the hanging. Another form of capital punishment that was used on women during the Middle Ages was burning. Women who were accused of poisoning their husbands were often subjected to a bizarre form of capital punishment known as the husband's revenge. Medieval prisons were dark, dank, and overcrowded. Life in medieval prison was harsh for both men and women. However, women faced more abuse than men. Women were imprisoned for a variety of reasons. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.